get him. Texas is an oil-producing state, the last I heard. So you might be interested in this, Senator. Basically, so Jay Powell does his whatever he's doing, mid-year review, fall review, some kind of review, and he gives his press conference. They're not going to raise rates. They're going to, quote, pause. I don't know why. But putting that aside, he never mentioned the latest oil spike, where, as you know, world oil prices are now marching back to $100, maybe higher. Who knows? Our great reporter, Edward Lawrence, asked him finally, and basically, that's the only time it came up in the entire news conference with Jay Powell, the Fed. And finally, Powell basically said, you know what? Oil doesn't affect inflation. Doesn't affect inflation. And that's why they look at core prices, which exclude food and energy, which, as you know, is what people use, which is what's starving the middle class and damaging the lower income folks, and why Bidenomics has failed. I mean, I just want to get your take on this. You know about the Fed, you know about hard money, a good dollar, and you know about oil. How the heck does the Fed chairman say oil prices don't really affect inflation?
Look, it's crazy. It's ludicrous. He knows what he's saying is false. Jay Powell's a smart guy. You and I both know Jay very well. He's also someone who doesn't want to tick off the Biden White House. When Trump was president, Jay said things that sound a little more conservative. Now that Biden's president, he says things that are more liberal. He wants to stay where he is, and he knows that he doesn't want to rock the political boats of the White House. But on the merits, the statement is absurd. I would ask any consumer at home. Is the fact that when you fill up your car or truck that you're paying 50% more at the gas pump, is that affecting your costs? Is the fact that farmers, for fertilizer, the price of fertilizer has skyrocketed, does that affect their costs? Is the fact that diesel in a tractor or farm equipment, that price has skyrocketed, does that affect their costs? Does the fact that every good you buy in the store travels either by train or truck and fuel costs have skyrocketed, does that affect your cost? Does the fact that if you're flying somewhere for business or pleasure, you get on an airplane and jet airplane fuel has skyrocketed, does that affect your cost? The cost of everything energy is baked into, and we've seen for 2.5 years the Biden administration wage a relentless war against U.S. oil and gas production. Joe Biden promised on the campaign trail if you elected him, he would shut off new drilling on federal lands, onshore and offshore. He has implemented over 20 different regulatory steps designed to do exactly that. And I'll tell you, the most pernicious is he's gone after capital. He's appointed banking regulators who are trying to cut off debt for new oil and gas exploration, and he's appointed SEC commissioners who are trying to cut off equity for new oil and gas exploration. Now, I ask you, Larry, you're an esteemed economist. If a business can't get debt and can't get equity, how the heck does it get capital to engage in new exploration and new drilling? The simple answer is it doesn't.
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't blame Powell for the oil spike, because I agree with you. You turn off the spigots, and this is what you get. And John Carney at Breitbart said it very well. He said, right now, oil production is in the hands of our enemies. That's what OPEC Plus is all about. Russia, Saudi Arabia, but also Iran and Venezuela. But Jay Powell's going to have to do something about it from a monetary standpoint, and he didn't want to deal with it today. And I think that was a huge mistake. I'm going to send you my riff, which I know you were voting, and that's a good thing. I like it when you vote. But what you just said to your answers is what I said in my opening riff. But we'll send it to you.
Oh, good. Good. Great minds think alike, and so do ours.
Well, you can. It's you can. It'll put you to sleep at night. Anyway, let me go to a different subject. This is, unfortunately, this is UN week here in New York, and besides the fact that the traffic is all tied up, Joe Biden speaks to the General Assembly yesterday, and he made a big pitch on more money and help for Ukraine. He never mentioned what is the big crisis in New York City and the rest of the country, which is open borders and all these hundreds of thousands of illegal migrants, hundreds of thousands, and New York City and all these other cities, sanctuary cities, can't pay for it. Let me just ask you two things, Senator Cruz. Number one, on the question of Ukraine, do we know, does anybody know, do you know, if the Bidens or anybody is trying to negotiate some kind of diplomatic initiatives that might generate a peace plan instead of having hundreds of thousands of people killed and hundreds of billions of dollars of American aid. Is anybody doing that kind of diplomacy that you're aware of, sir?
So if they are, I have no indication of it. We're certainly not hearing anything from the president, from the Biden administration, to suggest that they are. And listen, my criticism of the Biden administration on Ukraine has been, number one, Joe Biden caused this war because of his weakness, specifically when he waived sanctions on Russia and Putin and the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. Those are sanctions that I authored, passed into law, that Donald Trump signed into law, and those sanctions shut the Nord Stream 2 pipeline down and prevented a Russian invasion of Ukraine until Joe Biden became president. One of the first things he did is gave Russia and Putin a multi-billion-dollar gift, allowed Putin to complete that pipeline, and just weeks later, the tanks rolled into Ukraine. So he caused the war. But now, when it comes to the war, the Biden administration is utterly incoherent. My view is simple. Vladimir Putin is a bad man. We want him to lose this war. We want Russia to lose this war. But the Biden administration is funding both sides of the war simultaneously. Joe Biden went to the UN, says that he wants $24 billion for Ukraine and military aid, and simultaneously, in the past couple of weeks, Biden has announced $16 billion that he is allowing to flow into Iran. That $16 billion will be used to fund terrorism to kill Americans, but it will also be used to manufacture drones that the Russian army will in turn use to fight the Ukrainian army. Iran is Russia's #1 weapons supplier, and so the Biden administration is putting billions on both sides of the war, and then they're surprised that the war just drags on and on and on. It's utterly incoherent what they're doing.
By the way, Senator, you could add, Biden's war against fossil fuels driving up the price of oil is financing Russia.
Yep.
I mean, it's just it's financing Russia, and to a lesser extent, it's also financing Iran. Senator, one last point. It's very interesting editorial on Breitbart, which is a great news site. The editor, Marlowe, is saying, with respect to Joe Biden, that we should switch gears. We shouldn't be so obsessed with his age or his infirmity, okay, or even his gaffes. What we should be focusing on is the Biden corruption and the Biden policy mistakes. We have another Republican debate coming up. I know former President Trump won't be there, but a lot of strong, smart conservatives are going to be in that debate. I think Marlowe is right. It's not age. It's the failure of Bidenomics and the rest of his policies, and B, the corruption. That's where the GOP should aim its fire.
Well, listen, I don't think it's an either or. There's no doubt Biden has had enough mental deterioration that he's not up to the job, and that our enemies are emboldened by a weak and infirm president. But you're absolutely right. The corruption from the Biden White House is massive. The evidence is growing. I do a podcast every week, Verdict with Ted Cruz. We walk through in great detail the evidence, the direct evidence of Joe Biden's corruption, soliciting and receiving millions of dollars of bribes from foreign oligarchs. And on the policy front, every policy from the Biden administration has hurt the American people. We need to focus on how those policies are failing working men and women.
Got it. Senator Ted Cruz, thank you, sir. We appreciate it very much. All right, folks.